Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're taking an absolute sledgehammer to the pop culture image of the samurai. Seriously, forget the movies, forget the comic books, and forget those generalized myths you've probably heard about these legendary warriors. We're going to completely deconstruct the idealized image of the Japanese samurai and uncover the fascinating, and honestly often contradictory historical truth behind their famous concept of Bushido. It's a really wild journey that takes us all the way from ancient battlefields straight into modern corporate boardrooms, so let's just jump right in.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Did the ancient samurai actually follow a unified code? Because, when we think of the samurai, we almost automatically assume they all strictly adhered to a single, ancient, rigid set of rules from the very beginning of time. But prepare to have your preconceptions totally challenged. The answer to that question is a massive, resounding no. Historically speaking, there was absolutely zero uniform moral code among the early samurai class. In fact, the very word Bushido, which translates to the way of the warrior, didn't even exist before the Edo period, which started in 1603. And here's what's truly surprising. This code was largely theorized and codified not during a time of brutal, endless warfare, but during a prolonged period of peace. Plus, as Japan transitioned into a booming market economy during this peaceful era, the samurai were actually kind of clueless when it came to economics. They totally despised the abacus and mercantile pursuits, which really makes the evolution of their whole philosophy all the more intriguing. To make sense of the whole shebang, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the myth of the samurai, the roots of the warrior code, cultivating the unfettered mind, weaponizing the way, and we'll wrap up with modern echoes of Bushido. Starting us off with Section 1, the myth of the samurai and the Western perspective. So how exactly did we in the West get this monolithic, super romanticized idea of the samurai? Well, it literally boils down to one single guy. Back in 1899, an author named Nitobe Inazo published a book called Bushido, The Soul of Japan. Nitobe was just an incredible figure, a Japanese Renaissance man born into a samurai family who eventually held 5 doctorates, studied abroad, and converted to Quaker Christianity. And he wrote this book in flawless English specifically for a Western audience. Why? Because as Japan was entering the modern world stage, Nitobe really wanted to show the West that Japan wasn't some uncivilized nation. He wanted to prove they possessed their own highly sophisticated ethical system, completely comparable to European chivalry or the code of the British gentleman. And man, it was a massive hit. Even US President Theodore Roosevelt bought 60 copies just to give to his friends. But we do have to remember, Nitobe was presenting a somewhat idealized, romanticized version of the past. Moving right along to Section 2, Roots of the Warrior Code and its Philosophical Foundations. You see, Bushido wasn't just invented overnight. It organically mashed together from 3 totally distinct traditions. First, you've got Confucianism, which provided the social order, the hierarchy, and a really deep emphasis on loyalty and duty. Second, Zen Buddhism stepped in to offer the immense spiritual and psychological discipline required of a warrior, specifically teaching detachment from worldly desires and completely letting go of the fear of death. And third, Shinto, which is Japan's indigenous religion, instilled a profound reverence for nature, ancestral spirits, and strict loyalty to the emperor and the land. So together, these 3 philosophies perfectly locked together like puzzle pieces to create the absolute bedrock of the samurai mindset. Over time, several core virtues became explicitly associated with Bushido. Things like courage, benevolence, respect, honor, and loyalty. But the absolute crucial one I want you to focus on here is the very first one, gi, or rectitude. Gi was essentially the fundamental cornerstone guiding a samurai's entire moral compass. It demanded absolute moral correctness and the ability to make decisions based purely on what is right, without any hesitation or compromise whatsoever. Literally everything else built upon this foundational sense of justice. So picture this. Japan enters the peaceful Edo period, and suddenly there are no more massive wars to fight. What does a warrior class actually do in peacetime? Well, a 17th century philosopher named Yamaga Soko helped answer that. He completely redefined the samurai's role, arguing that they should evolve from being purely military fighters into what he called warrior sages. Soko taught that the samurai had to serve as examples of Confucian purity, essentially offering moral and political leadership for the rest of society. So they basically became administrators and bureaucrats, but they were still bound by this incredibly high ethical standard. Which brings us to Section 3, Cultivating the Unfettered Mind Through Zen and Psychology.
To really understand the samurai, we have to look way past just physical swordsmanship. There was this brilliant Zen monk named Takuan Soho who famously taught that the mind stopping at any of these places, you become an empty shell. Think about a life or death duel. If your mind stops to focus on your opponent's sword or even your own sword or your fear, your natural rhythm is completely broken. Your movements are undone and you're defeated. Your mind literally becomes an empty shell, just trapped by a single passing thought.
And this brings us to a brilliant mental image for Takuan's point, the red leaf analogy. Imagine you're looking at a huge tree full of red leaves. If you focus your eye entirely on one single red leaf, you completely miss all the others, right? The rest of the tree effectively disappears. But if you face the tree with no specific focus, with a state of no mind, no thought, you see the entire tree at once. This is exactly what Takuan called immovable wisdom. It is the ultimate state of flow, where a warrior processes literally everything around them, but is attached to absolutely nothing. Now we have to talk about Section 4, weaponizing the way, and a rather tragic manipulation. As we move into the late 19th century, we need to take a really objective look at how this profound philosophy got hijacked. During the Meiji Restoration, the samurai class was officially abolished, but the government realized the immense psychological power of the samurai's values. You see, feudal Bushido focused on loyalty to a local lord or clan to maintain feudal stability, but Meiji Bushido shifted that loyalty directly to the emperor and the nation itself. The noble principles of self-sacrifice and duty were ideologically hijacked by ultra-nationalists. They used it to foster absolute obedience to the state and to justify aggressive militaristic expansion. If we trace the timeline, the rapid escalation here is just staggering. In 1889, Japan gets a modern constitution. Just a decade later, Nidabe's book introduces this romanticized Bushido to the entire world. By the time of the Russo-Japanese War in 1904, Bushido has become a massive source of national pride. But by the 1930s, this pride had horribly mutated. A radicalized state ideology fully took hold, weaponizing concepts like honor and self-sacrifice to incredibly dangerous extremes. This fanaticism led directly into Japan's involvement in World War II, manifesting most notoriously in the absolute self-sacrifice of kamikaze pilots.
And finally, Section 5, modern echoes of Bushido and its constructive virtues. So why does all this ancient history actually matter to us today? Well, because after World War II, Japan completely rejected the militaristic interpretations of Bushido, but they selectively kept its constructive virtues. Take the concept of Kaizen, for example, which means continuous, incremental improvement. The ancient samurai were absolutely relentless in their disciplined pursuit of martial and spiritual mastery. Today, that exact same drive for perfection and meticulous attention to detail is the literal engine behind Japan's incredible corporate success and manufacturing quality. And then we have omotenashi. Remember those samurai virtues of Jin and Rei, benevolence and respect? Well, those virtues evolved directly into Japan's world-renowned standard of meticulous customer service and hospitality. It's all about serving a guest selflessly, literally anticipating what they need before they even ask, and doing it without expecting any reward. It is essentially the peaceful, modern expression of a warrior's respect. These historical echoes are literally everywhere in modern Japanese behavior. That fierce loyalty to a feudal lord, that translates today into loyalty to a company and maintaining wa, or group harmony. The samurai's sacred bond to their word is seen in modern strict punctuality and intense personal responsibility. And perhaps most powerfully, the concept of gaman, enduring adversity with patience. The samurai's intense mental training to face death translates today into Japan's remarkable collective resilience, emotional restraint, and deep stoicism during severe crises, like earthquakes and natural disasters. So we've seen how Bushido is this incredibly complex tapestry of profound virtues and, quite frankly, dark historical manipulation, which leaves us with this final, really important question to consider. Can we, in our own modern lives, adopt the immovable wisdom, the resilience, and the continuous improvement of the samurai without falling victim to the dangers of unquestioning obedience and the suppression of our own individuality? It's a tricky balance to strike for sure, and a fascinating challenge to leave you with. Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.